Detective John Reeves, the chief investigator, calmly lit a cigarette and took a drag. He wasn't thrilled about the idea of spending another weekend on duty. The atmosphere at Garfield Park Police Station had been chaotic lately. Each day began with alarming calls reporting shootings, murders, and robberies. Chicago was buzzing with criminal activity. Even the recent frost that had covered the city couldn't calm the streets. On the contrary, it seemed like the gangsters were eager to carry out more crimes to keep warm. John waited for his partner, Sergeant Doan, who was expected to arrive any moment. They needed to meet with their superiors to provide an update on their successful shutdown of the bootlegging operation in Garfield Park. He knew that if their report didn't please the bosses, he wouldn't get the weekend off, which would make everyone at home extremely unhappy. The thought of it made John feel frustrated, but he brushed it aside and focused on finding the best way to present the report to his superiors. Dohan rushed into the station, covered in snow, and glanced guiltily at Reeves. They exchanged silent nods before heading to the chief's office. They wanted to get it over with and go home to rest. Their shift had already lasted more than 20 hours. Once in the office, they prepared to deliver their progress report, but their chief, Lieutenant Jeff Orbis, interrupted them with a hand gesture.
Listen up, both of you. Hurry over to Arlington.
The lieutenant said.
Sir, we're not entirely clear on.
Dohan began, seeking clarification.
We received a strange call this morning about unusual rituals and other things. I dispatched a patrol with Kenrose and Leslie, and they haven't returned or made contact yet. I don't want to make a fuss. The last thing we need right now is some nonsense about witches.
The lieutenant spoke in a hushed tone, clearly agitated.
Shouldn't we bring in more officers? Could this be a trap set by Bing's gang?
Dohan suggested, expressing his concerns about going alone, especially after a patrol had already disappeared without a trace.
You two are seasoned detectives. If you notice anything suspicious, call for backup. For now, just investigate and find out what's going on and where our officers are.
The lieutenant's patience was wearing thin.
Understood, Chief.
Reeves scolded himself mentally and stood up from his chair. The urge to take action, even violently, resurfaced in his mind. At least now he knew where he needed to go to channel that energy. Chicago was covered in so much snow that sometimes it was easier to walk than drive. Reeves leisurely maneuvered their police Ford through the streets. The day was gradually turning into evening, and the sun cast a pleasant golden glow on the horizon, creating an illusion of brightness and safety. But appearances could be deceiving. Crime reports blared with alarming statistics. The number of murders and robberies had long exceeded all imaginable limits. The entire police department was overwhelmed. Strikes demanding a crackdown on crime erupted in various parts of the city almost daily. Reeves's thoughts were somber. He realized there were only two possibilities why the patrol hadn't made contact yet. Either they were deceased, or their walkie-talkie had malfunctioned, leaving them unable to reach the nearest payphone. He sincerely hoped for the latter scenario. They drove casually into Arlington as the sun was about to set. The distress call had originated from the end of Vine Street, near Ridge Park. The streets were heavily covered in snow, causing Reeves to maneuver carefully through the road's tracks. They parked their vehicle 2 houses before the designated location and surveyed the street attentively. Their fellow officer's patrol car was nowhere in sight, which was a concerning sign. Now they would have to interrogate the residents nearby to determine if they had witnessed any police presence, despite Reeves and his partner not believing in witches. They firmly believed in the power of a 45-inch cartridge and the Thompson trigger attached to it. Therefore, they scrutinized the surrounding houses for any signs of movement. Reeves kept the engine running, a persistent sense of unease lingering within him. He trusted his instincts, as they had guided him to become a senior detective. Several minutes passed, yet there was no activity in the house from where the call had originated. After confirming their weapons were ready and notifying the radio of their arrival, Reeves and Doan cautiously exited the vehicle and proceeded forward. As they reached the porch of the house, they peered cautiously through the tightly drawn curtains, unable to discern anything inside. The house remained silent, devoid of any sound or illuminated lights. Suddenly, Doan, positioned in the driveway at the rear of the house, softly whistled to get Reeves' attention. He gestured towards a spot deep in the yard. Reeves descended from the porch and directed his gaze in that direction. A police car was parked at the back of the house. They immediately gripped their firearms tightly and advanced slowly towards it, exercising extreme caution. The surroundings appeared deserted, and the interior of the vehicle was empty.
It seems they haven't mastered the art of disappearing.
Reeves thought to himself, gripping his Colt even firmer.
Go back to the car and request backup while I investigate the backyard.
Reeves instructed, already aware that this situation would not end well. Doan disappeared around the corner of the house, and Reeves meticulously observed his surroundings. There were no signs of a struggle, nor were there any bullet holes in the car. This suggested that their colleagues were likely inside the house, their fate unknown. He leisurely approached the corner of the house to reunite with Doan. Stillness pervaded the area, causing goosebumps to rise on his skin. It was unclear whether the sensation was due to the cold or a foreboding of impending danger. As he rounded the corner, Reeves froze in horror. His partner, Doan, lay motionless in the snow before they could reach their car, indicating that reinforcements were no longer a possibility. The hairs on Reeves' neck stood on end. Slowly, he began retreating towards the garage where the police car was parked, his senses heightened to the maximum. He strained to catch any slight rustle or sound, his footsteps crunching loudly on the snow. Suddenly, a sharp pain jolted through his side. Instinctively, he turned, but there was no one there. Reeves frantically scanned his surroundings, only to be met with silence. A ringing sensation echoed in his ears, resembling the impact of a blow to his head. The only audible sound was his own breathing, erratic and shallow, worsening by the second.
What the hell is going on?
These thoughts raced through his mind as his legs gave way beneath him. He collapsed onto the car, sliding down slowly into the snow. A whirlwind of thoughts and confusion engulfed him. Just then, the door of the house swung open. Emerging from the doorway was a woman clad in a baffling attire that resembled white sheets. Her thick black hair obscured her face from view. Reeves instinctively attempted to raise his gun, but his hand remained limp in the snow. His head throbbed, spinning with dizziness. The enigmatic woman in white approached him with deliberate slowness, fixing her gaze upon Reeves for a few moments. He wanted to ask her who she was, but his mouth and tongue refused to cooperate, producing only incoherent sounds. She merely laughed and leaned in close to Reeves, whispering,
"Welcome to hell, John."
Mondays were Kenrose's least favorite days, and early duty Mondays were even worse. He took a contemplative sip of his iced coffee. Recoiling from the bitter cold. The weather was abysmal, permeating everything with its icy grip. His partner, Leslie, finished checking the papers of the Chrysler owner, for whom they had received an AP. Finding a place to warm up was imperative, but their superiors had assigned them to duty at the freezing intersection. They took turns seeking respite in the warmth of their patrol car, making it feel like the most wretched Monday of their lives. Suddenly, the radio in the car crackled to life. They were instructed to investigate a house in Arlington, providing a welcome escape from their intersection post. Kenrose swiftly grabbed the radio and confirmed their response, gesturing to Leslie to head to the car. They arrived at the location without much delay. The house sat at the far end of the street. Conducting a visual assessment, they found no signs of violence or disorder on the exterior. Approaching the porch, they knocked. But there was no response. They increased the intensity of their knocks, calling out names and demanding entry, yet it remained unanswered. Kenrose directed his partner to secure the yard's exit with their patrol car, anticipating that the potential culprits might attempt an unexpected escape. He tried peering through the blinded porch window, but couldn't discern anything. Determined, he decided to try the backyard instead. Leslie was already surveying the windows as Kenrose joined him. They cautiously inspected the back door, surprised to find it ajar. Sharing a glance, they drew their weapons and proceeded inside with caution. The atmosphere inside the house felt peculiar. Sheets hung all around, and a thick layer of dust covered the floor, giving the impression of an abandoned dwelling. In a sudden moment, Kenrose's attention was drawn to a figure on the second-floor staircase. The woman stood there, her face obscured by her flowing blonde hair. Raising his pistol, he sternly ordered her to stay put. In response, all he heard was her laughter before she swiftly vanished into the darkness of the second floor.
Damn it! Leslie! Upstairs!
Kenrose shouted, scanning the area cluttered with sheets. His instincts urged him to call for backup, but the woman appeared unarmed, and he feared his colleagues would mock him. He decided to detain her first, and then determine the next course of action. Navigating through the obstructing sheets, Kenrose cautiously made his way to the back of the house. Slowly, he pushed aside each sheet, meticulously examining every inch. As he unraveled the sheets into the kitchen, he froze in disbelief. There, suspended from the ceiling, was a woman dressed similarly to the one on the second floor. Her hair was black, and a rope tightly gripped her neck. A shiver ran down his spine. He should have called for backup without hesitation. Backing away, Kenrose aimed to reach the patrol car, where he could use the radio to summon assistance. Fear overwhelmed him as the sheets entangled his movements, fueling panic as he frantically dashed towards the car. He burst out onto the porch, hastily flinging open the car door. But in that very moment, he felt his body losing control. Collapsed in the snow, Kenrose struggled to move, his gaze fixated on bare feet approaching through the snow. Looking up, he encountered the woman who had been hanging in the kitchen only moments ago. Terror washed over him, wondering if it was all some delusion. She leaned closer, and as he caught sight of her face, empty, glass-like eyes, and a wicked smile, he succumbed to unconsciousness. Reeves regained consciousness, greeted by an intense, biting cold. He surveyed his surroundings, a dark expanse of trees and snow. His mouth was tightly taped shut, and his limbs were bound. Desperate to comprehend his situation and find a means of escape, he turned to the other side and discovered Dohan, similarly restrained in the snow. Suddenly, an eerie laughter echoed through the air. Reeves jerked his head frantically, his very being consumed by terror. Two figures emerged from the darkness, two women clad in white. One of them, the brunette from before, was the same woman who had emerged from the house. They approached Leslie, who lay unconscious nearby, seized him, and dragged him towards the trees. Reeves attempted to scream, but the gag stifled any sound. The chilling cold tightened its grip on his body, rendering his bound hands and feet unresponsive. It was only a matter of time before the women returned, dragging Kenrose after Leslie. Reeves desperately pondered his options, attempting to crawl towards Dohan, hoping to rouse him. Perhaps together, they could devise a plan for their liberation. Realizing time was of the essence, Reeves maneuvered laboriously, crawling towards his partner. Lieutenant Orbis, accompanied by the patrol officers, surveyed the unsettling crime scene. Never before had he encountered such a sight. Strange runes, seemingly etched with pig's blood, adorned the snow. Ribbons hung from the trees, and extinguished candles littered the ground within the center of the runes. Reeves and his colleagues were nowhere to be found. Lieutenant Orbis stood bewildered, uncertain of the unfolding events. There was no trace of human blood, and the house offered no clues. The two empty police cars stood silently nearby. Action needed to be taken, but the lieutenant was unsure of the appropriate course. He ordered an all-points bulletin for the missing officers and resolved to find a forensic scientist knowledgeable about rituals. The utmost priority was to avoid informing the press. He turned thoughtfully toward the exit of Ridge Park. As he took a few steps, a tree caught his eye. There was something in the trunk. He walked over and saw 4 darts, similar to those used in darts, but with a feathering and a thin needle on the end. He turned around and told them to take them as evidence. He hurried to the car. A pair of eyes watched Orbis' every move very closely. The eyes were indifferent. They seemed to be made of glass and not alive at all. But they were watching the lieutenant extremely closely. As he headed for the exit of the park, a soft, "Hello, Jeff," could be heard in the air.